Electrikjam podcast.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome to the Electrikjam podcast. I'm Christopher, and I'm here with Richard and Fran. And today we have a very special episode for you. Today is all about movie soundtracks. And we're actually going to expand that to video game soundtracks as well, because Fran brought up some really good ones. And if you don't know who Fran is our photographer. She does a lot of the shoots for our pedals and gear and stuff like that. Stuff that I am definitely not talented enough to do. Say hello, Fran.
Hi, everyone.
And Richard, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing very well. Looking forward to this one.
Today is Richard's birthday.
It is.
Everyone say happy birthday to Richard.
Woo, happy birthday!
He's 39.
Yeah, forever. For the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's what I said in 2 episodes ago. You just got to be 39 from here on out.
Yeah, I don't mind being 40. That's fine. I can handle 40. 40's okay. It's 50. It's the closest to 50 and then 60 that kind of worry me. Because they used to be so far away, but now they're kind of closer than they are to when I was 20, which is scary.
Well, think about retirement. I mean, that's like 20 years away.
No, I mean, I live on Prison Island, so no one's retiring here.
I guess it's the same thing for America.
Well, I'll be working down a coal mine when I'm like 70. This is the way the UK is going. So you never know. It's not good here. So, and the government's completely inept. So any idea of being able to retire for like a lot of people is just, I don't think it's going to happen.
You should come to America where you'll have to work. You'll only have to work until you're like 80.
Well, they keep knocking up the retirement age officially. So by the time I get around to retiring, it'll be, well, you know, we have all this life extension stuff now, so you can easily work until you're 125, and then you can have a few years off, and then you can die. So
the future is bleak.
Yeah, bleak and tiring.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as movie soundtracks go, I am a complete Hans Zimmer stan. I love everything he ever did. I think I really took notice of him during Sicario when that movie came out, because I don't know, there's a track on that called The Beast where they're crossing over the border, and it's one of the coolest tracks I think I've ever heard before. And I know that Fran is going to say the same thing because she listens to it in the car all the time.
Yeah, my soundtrack that really kicked it off was my big one was Inception. I just loved how dramatic and crazy everything was, and it really showcased what was going on in the scene that it was playing in musically. It just really hit me. I loved it.
It was the first with the big klaxon, wasn't it? The bwah, that was like the first when Hans Zimmer invented the big klaxon that was subsequently been used in literally every film released. Right. Very much. So every trailer,
at least in every trailer.
Bwah. Yeah, literally even if it's a rom-com, it's always like bwah, and that big klaxon kind of sounds out. But yeah, I'm massive Hans Zimmer fan, and he's so varied. That's the thing. That's what's so impressive about him, is that he can do really good, like the sci-fi stuff like Inception, Interstellar, but then he's got, The Lion King and like Pirates of the Caribbean, which is completely kind of different. And
completely different direction, yeah.
But he's fantastic. I mean, he's absolutely like untouchable. He's kind of sort of superseded John Williams in a massive way, I think, as like the kind of like composer's composer now.
Well, I was going to say that's exactly who kicked it off for me, was John Williams, because I think the Star Wars movies, I mean, everything that he did in the 80s was just amazing. And I really started taking note of some of his softer stuff, especially in Star Wars. Like, you had the big bombastic theme that comes in that everyone knows, but a lot of the smaller arrangements that people don't pay attention to, that's what really started hooking me. And I think after that, it was Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross that I really started paying attention to when they did The Social Network.
Oh, you're right. That one was a good one too.
Yeah, that's a really good one. That's they kind of really hit their stride with that. They did some before that, I think, didn't they? But it kind of, because Trent's got, it's very it sounds just like him. Do you know what I mean? Like if you know Nine Inch Nails and you hear it, it's like unmistakably Trent Reznor. He's got these kind of chords that he tends to use quite a lot, and it gives him
the chromatic scale. Yeah,
yeah, and it kind of gives him
lot.
that. Yeah, and it's similar with like Hans Zimmer and John Williams and Clint Mansell. They all have this like signature sort of palette.
I love Clint Mansell.
Yeah, he's my favorite out of all of them, and because he's new, and because I just think the Fountain soundtrack is like one of the best soundtrack like compositions ever.
Oh, that's who did that. What else has he done, Fran?
I think he did. Did he do Moon?
Yeah,
Polaris?
He did Moon. He did the most famous one. Ironically, is he did Requiem for a Dream. That's kind of where he got.
Oh,
and he did Pi as well. Then The Fountain. Then Moon, Black Swan, Noah. He was Darren Aronofsky's like basically
go-to guy. Yeah,
go-to guy. Yeah. And he kind of had that run of like Requiem for a Dream, Pi. And then The Fountain, so that's from like 1998 up to 2006. And then Moon, I think, was 2009. And then Black Swan, which was 2010. So, yeah, he's great. He's got, it's like a very distinctive palette, the same as kind of John Williams and Hans Zimmer, where you just know it's them straight away, which is kind of like Morricone from the old westerns and stuff, where you hear it and you're like immediately like, oh yeah. You know who it is, and it sets the scene too, and it fits so well with the aesthetic. But what thing is weird, I find weird a lot now, particularly about kind of like straight to streaming movies, is when they use, and I really, really hate this, is when they use like contemporary music. So like chart music, stuff that's kind of popular when the film comes out. In the film,
like pop music that's good right now, but like
but it's never pop. It's like it's always some like
later.
rap music, some rubbish kind of, I don't know, like TikTok music. I kind of call it because I don't really know what it is. It's almost like genre, not very genre specific, because it just sounds like something you just hear playing through like people's phones, and it's annoying. And that's the only time I ever really hear it. But the use of that in films... I completely
agree with you.
But when they do that in films now, a lot of Netflix films do this, where they'll use like contemporary music, and they've got such a short window anyway. I mean, that kind of music's got such a short shelf life as a tangible thing before everyone's forgotten all about it. And then to use it in a film, it's a really odd choice, and I don't really understand why filmmakers do that.
Yeah, because it instantly dates the film.
Yeah, and it doesn't make. I think like a soundtrack as well. Like this is why.
Unless it's like a period piece, like it happens in the 80s, like the way Stranger Things does. You know, they used Master of Puppets and they used Kate Bush, and that was perfect for that because
it's tied to that place. It's you already know that.
It's that time. Yeah,
hindsight's fine because you go, oh yeah, that was the 80s. That's the music that was around then. But it's to try and attach something that you think is going to be the zeitgeist in 10 years from now to this period.
Right.
You're never going to get it right because there's just too much music and there's too much varied taste now. So it doesn't really work that well, I don't think. Particularly when you've got like people like, Clint Mansell, Hans Zimmer still going, and all these guys just and there's lots of like new ones coming up who are doing the who do a lot of the kind of Sky Atlantic stuff. The guy that did Game of Thrones soundtrack, and he did Westworld.
It's Ramin Djawadi.
That's the one, yeah. Like he's really good too.
That Westworld soundtrack for the first season is amazing. I couldn't stop listening to that when I first found it.
Yeah, and it's like the way, even like the Game of Thrones one, it's such like an iconic piece of music. Because as soon as you hear it, you're just like, oh yeah. Like it's got that kind of almost like the good, the bad, and the ugly kind of vibe to it. Because it almost sounds that familiar, that iconic. So as soon as you hear it, you see everything, and you kind of the whole aesthetic of the show and the characters. And it's very hard to do that. Like it's very rare for a film or a TV show soundtrack to kind of have that kind of pull. In a modern sense, I mean, there's plenty that do it.
I agree. Yeah,
it's like Jaws or Star Wars or Indiana Jones. It's kind of up there with those, if that makes sense, in terms of how like anthemic it is.
Right, you know it immediately. Like, I know the Game of Thrones theme immediately when you hear those first few notes, you know?
Yeah, and it's as anthemic as like the Star Wars music. Really, kind of, as soon as you hear it, you're like, oh yeah. It's one of the only modern instances that I can think of that, of something like that being that quite new, but also like you can just hear it and everyone's like, oh yeah, straight away. There's not even, you can hear like the first like half a second of it and you know instantly that that's what it was.
And that kind of thing is really cool because when they put it in the show, like when you hear the main theme in the context of the show, when something really dramatic just happened, that's like so cool when they like do like a musical callback, you know?
Yeah, I was going to say, what's that called? It's a callback.
Yeah, it's a callback. Yep. Something that Fran knows a lot more about than you or I. Fran likes video games a lot.
Okay.
And video game soundtracks have kind of become the new movie soundtrack. There's a lot of really, really good ones. And I don't know, I play games that are like 10 years old and I just replay them over and over and over because, you know, I don't really keep up with the newer stuff, but Fran definitely does. And what are your favorites, Fran?
Well, first of all, he's making me sound like I'm a total gamer, and I'm not. I'm like a casual gamer. I play Diablo nonstop. That's my jam. As far as soundtracks for games go, I thought Cyberpunk 2077 was really great. The first one that came out. I grew up in Germany, so that whole techno sort of mechanically made music kind of has followed me into adulthood. So I love all of that synthwave stuff. I think it's amazing.
Okay.
Same.
I haven't heard that soundtrack. It kind of, from what I can imagine, is it a bit like the Tron album that Daft Punk did? Sort of electro.
Sort of.
Retro-y
it's kind of
electro, but with lots of like
it's a lot of ambient sounds. I think that stuff is really cool. I'm one of those people that's either I have to listen to lo-fi or everything is so busy that you start crying because you're so overwhelmed.
Yeah, I get that. No, I haven't heard that. I'm not. I literally, the last game I played was, I think, Alien Isolation and The Last of Us.
I love all that stuff.
That was like 2014.
Yep.
That was literally, that was it. But I remember the Last of Us had really good soundtrack to it. Like really lots of like nice like moody guitar and kind of sound like because you know like in Clint Eastwood's new films he does a lot of the tracks on his guitar.
Mm-hmm. Like The Last of Us is mostly acoustic guitar.
Yeah, and it's just kind of it's got that kind of Clint Eastwood vibe to it where it's just sort of like, what's that film he did about the car? Where he's like an old guy.
Gran Torino.
Gran
Torino, yeah. It kind of had that kind of like vibe to it, I thought, when I listened to it. That like sort of distant little acoustic guitar just being picked away on. But yeah.
Yeah. You need to check out Cyberpunk because it has Health is on there. What's another good one? Carpenter Brute.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of like that 80s synthwave stuff to where it's like an alternate version of the 80s. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like it's craft
retrofuturism.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That's a good word for it.
I do like that aesthetic as well. It's very cool. I think we were trying to come up with a logo for the site. I spent about a month trying to explain to you what I wanted it to look like, and you were like, "Do you mean retrofuturism?" And I was like, "Yes." Why don't I know that word? Like it took me so long to try.
There's a word for it?
There is apparently, and Chris knew it all along. So
yeah, you were so vague about it when we were first starting the website. You were like, like bright colors, but like not, but like vintage. And I was like, what in the world is he talking about? And then
like
I sent you a picture.
Album cover with the people on a different planet with the kind of like Dune, but it's mechanical, but it's futuristic.
Yeah, I finally sent you a picture from, I think it's a Carpenter Brute album. No, it's Perturbator. It's one of his albums. I sent you one of those album covers and you were like, yes, that's it, with the teal and the hot pink. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
Retrofuturism.
Yeah, it's cool. I like it. Like the neon kind of vibe to it. It's got like that. Have you seen Enter the Void by Caspar Goe? That's a really weird film, and that's kind of got that sort of retro-futuristic. It's like Blade Runner, I guess. There's a lot of like Blade Runner vibes to it, which another good soundtrack, Vangelis.
Oh yes, you're right. Yeah, I love that one too.
The new one as well was the new one. The soundtrack from that was really good too. But they kind of kept the same sort of vibe going.
I think that was also Hans Zimmer, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah, because it was Villeneuve, wasn't it? So he would have been. He kind of uses him on his kind of go-to. Christopher Nolan and Villeneuve. Yep. He's like that guy. But there was
like all the groundbreaking directors, like the newer groundbreaking directors that are making classics that are going to be known, like, 20 years from now, people are still going to be talking about Interstellar.
Yeah, that soundtrack is ridiculous. That's like, I'd say that's one of my all-time favorites. It's so good. It's so simple as well. So the main bits are so perfect, but they're so simple. Because I was like, I can't play the piano I can't play it very well at all. But I literally learned how to play the main melody bit, and I was like, no way. It's just like an octave, isn't it? So it's going up and down an octave, yeah. And it just sounds so good, though. Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. And I saw that in the IMAX, and I remember coming away from it, and you know it's an impressive soundtrack when, like, without the music, the film would have probably been like 20% not as good.
I agree.
It's a fantastic film. But the film because a soundtrack to me can make or break a film. Like it can be. There's some really odd ones as well. That kind of when you see a film where the music doesn't fit, or it's just not done very well.
It kind of ruins the whole vibe of the movie, and I think it's a testament to composers. I mean, modern ones definitely, if they're able to enhance a movie with their music or their soundscape. There you go. That's the big word for it.
Yeah, I'd love to know how much when the director comes in and kind of goes, "No, I don't like it. Try something else." I mean, because if it's John Williams or Hans Zimmer, you're going to walk in there and be like, "Can you just try it this way? Try a little bit, a bit more at the end or something." And he's like, "Excuse me." It's Oscar-winning Hans Zimmer taking notes from some upcoming director, but they must have, because the director must have final say on the kind of music, surely.
It depends on the people. So Trent Reznor was talking about doing his newest movie, Challenger, and he talked about how his first soundtracks in the 90s, because he did Lost Highway and he did Natural Born Killers, but those were compilations, right? He just grabbed a bunch of songs that he knew would be good in that movie and then put them all together. And he didn't really do the soundtrack. He just put a bunch of songs together. So when he did Social Network and stuff like that, he kind of put it in his contract that, you can take what you want, but like, we're going to deliver you these tracks and you can do whatever you want with them. You have final say where they go, but
we're not doing any rewrites.
You can't change it, like they don't direct Trent and Atticus. It's more like they hand over something. And I think that's the same thing with Hans Zimmer. I think
I think at that level,
his thing.
Yeah, I think at that level, he's kind of brought in as an artist to add his own sheen to the film, and he's kind of proved that he can do it. I mean, the soundtrack for the new Dune films is
insane,
it's so good. I mean, again, that's another film. If somebody else did the soundtrack, like you watch the original, the David Lynch one, and
and Toto did the soundtrack.
Yeah, it just doesn't quite have the same sort of space trucking vibe, does it? It's a bit. The new music it's so perfect. It's almost like when you read the book, it's kind of like, that's kind of what I imagined it would sound like. Do you know? It's, even though you read a book and you kind of have like not a theme tune, but kind of like a tone to something, and then when you see it on the big screen, that's for me is one of the most jarring things when you watch something that's a adaptation and the music changes the kind of feel and tone of the film completely. That's one of the reasons one of the many reasons why I really hated Prometheus, because the music was awful. It was such a bad soundtrack.
I absolutely agree. Yeah.
It was really poorly scored. It was almost like sounded like something like Lord of the Rings. It was like twee, and there was like there was nothing foreboding about it. There was no menace. It was just sort of like do 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 do.
Yeah, it was just kind of there,
plodding around it. But the only good thing to come out of seeing that film was that's where I discovered Clint Mansell and that album. It was for the Fountain. Because he did it with the Kronos Quartet, and it was playing in the IMAX. And I was like, "What is this music? It's so good!" And I had to literally get my phone out and Shazam it. And I was like, "No way!" So then I listened to it on the way. It was Zabolbo, which is one of the tracks.
Yeah.
On the film, and it's just oh god! I think I listened to the album. I listen to it all the time. It's one of those albums that's I'll always find it like the time to listen to it. At some point, I'll just be driving and be like, yeah, I'm going to put that on and just listen to it because it's so like sad but beautiful and uplifting, and I'd say
kind
it
of rolls everything together. Yeah,
I'd say it's actually
I like
better
the movie.
The film is good. I like the film, but the soundtrack's almost better.
I agree.
Because the film is good, but it's not. It's very ambitious and it does a lot.
Yeah,
but it's not 100% successful in its execution, whereas the soundtrack is so good, like so good.
The thing about the new Dune is he really captures everything by using chromatic scales, and he uses the Phrygian mode a lot for our guitar nerds that are listening. And the Phrygian mode kind of gives like an Arabic sound to everything, like it's an exotic scale, and that main Dune theme is all Phrygian, and that's why it sounds exotic. And
it really does. Spicy.
He just nailed it for that. Like Fran and I saw both of those movies in the theater, and we immediately, separately, started listening to the soundtrack, and then we ended up texting each other and saying, "Hey, did you listen to track number 4 on the Dune soundtrack?" And it's like, "Yes, it's so amazing."
It's just got so many weird bits in it. I was just listening to it, and it's just I had it on in the car, and Jilla was like,
"Oh, it's so good in the car."
He's like, "What the hell are you listening to?" And I was like, "It's the Dune soundtrack." She's like, "It just sounds like some space stuff, just people bumbling around in space." And I was like, "Well,
I mean, that's essentially what they're doing."
Yeah, I'd love to see how he does it. But I know they make that weird like thing with some kind of weird, almost like a vuvuzela that like spins around.
Didn't you read an article on this, Fran? Didn't they make instruments?
Oh, yes, you're right. Yeah, they actually created some of their own instruments. I don't know what the specific ones were. I don't remember. But they actually created instruments to make specific sounds that would work well with that movie. And I actually also read that Hans Zimmer, is a huge fan of the Dune series. And ever since he read it and saw the original, I guess the first not great movie, started to have the soundtrack in his head. And I think that's why it ended up being so successful as it is now.
He had already written
because he loves the series. Yeah.
And same with Villeneuve. I think he really did it justice. It's just unlike. He's so good though. He's basically like it's him and Christopher Nolan are effectively, and Tarantino are kind of holding up the movie industry to the old standards, the old gold standards.
Yeah.
From sort of 30, 40 years ago. Because
how do you feel about people like Tarantino though? That like in Pulp Fiction, I'd say about 80% of that soundtrack is using 60s and 70s deep cut hits.
Yeah, well,
like
that works. That works, I think, because he's doing it from a place of authenticity. And that's the difference between someone who's just doing like one of these newer films for Netflix where they're just trying to make a kind of we wanted to appeal
that's what I was coming
and we wanted to appeal to these kind of demographics and stuff. Whereas he's just like, screw it. This is a film about some criminals and drug dealers and murderers and rapist cops and all this kind of thing. And it's not a nice film, and it's pretty gritty, and it's the aesthetic part. I mean, it's a huge part of the aesthetic is the music. Same with Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah,
Reservoir Dogs
absolutely.
is everyone knows the music. The music's almost as important as everything else in the film, but he does it in a way where it's kind of a lot like his style of filmmaking, which is like pastiche. It's sort of nods to things. It's very wears its influences on its sleeve, and
He's a filmmaker's filmmaker.
yeah, but it works when it's done with when it's done with authenticity. It works because he knows exactly what will fit with that film perfectly, and that's kind of why it works, and why it also doesn't work when you try to make something and you have one of your researchers go out and find out what's trending on TikTok right now. We want to put that in the film.
Insert a Lady Gaga song in here.
I mean,
And,
yeah. I don't know. I really don't know. Some of the stuff that I hear now, I'm just, yeah. I mean, it doesn't inspire me to want to go on TikTok. Put it that way.
Fran, what's some other video game soundtracks that you would say Richard and I should check out? Because I hear a lot of them in the car with you, going back and forth, and sometimes it's a video game that I'm kind of familiar with, and sometimes it's not. So, like, what's a really good one other than Cyberpunk?
Well, Cyberpunk. Just kidding. I usually have a just random playlist on Spotify that will play just random soundtrack music from anything. So that's how I found most of my stuff. But one that's a little older that I really liked for some reason. Actually, I liked the composer, I guess you could call him. I'm not going to pronounce his name because I'm going to butcher it. But it was the soundtrack for Infamous for the video game. I don't know when that came out. I think that game's pretty old.
2014, I think.
And that one is one of those where the music is really weird, but it's also really good. I don't know. It's my driving music. I drive a lot for work, so I need something where I can kind of zone out and, just listen.
Yeah, I get that.
Also the Warhammer 40K Mechanicus soundtrack is really great. It's more of a classical kind of take, but there's some tech stuff behind there. Also, they used a choir in the background for some of the tracks. I sang in a choir for 7 years, so that I love that, hearing those things, and I think it's really pretty. I've never played either of those games. I have no idea. I mean, I guess Warhammer is cool because Henry Cavill likes it, but
yeah,
that's all I know about it.
Well, apparently there's going to be a show, so I wonder if they're going to use because there is a religious element to Warhammer. There's the orange
celibacy.
Catholics.
I just made a joke about this. You said there was a religious element to it, and I was like, the celibacy.
I guess.
Is that a part of Warhammer? I've never played it.
You don't get laid very often, I don't think, but
that's why it's so dramatic.
It was a joke. Oh God, that did not land well at all.
Because it's nerdy. Oh
yeah. God,
sorry, my tism is showing today.
Yeah. Well, they always say English humor's quite highbrow, so.
I don't know. I like Monty Python and the young ones.
That's true. But that's very, yeah. I mean, you're a sophisticated chap. I can see that. Speaking of video game soundtracks, which is one I completely forgot about, the Halo soundtrack from the original game. Because we used to play that. With
Steve Vai.
The one that's just like, it's just like a choral kind of thing. And because you play at your friend's house and, you have a drink and then you leave it on and you kind of half fall asleep at 3 a.m. And it on the pause screen or when it's kind of on Halo, but it's not doing anything. It's just kind of sat there. And that music would just play. And you'd always just hear it in the background. It was like the soundtrack to your dream. But it was so relaxing, like this monk chanting in a really cavernous room.
Sounds like a Sarah Brightman song or something. It comes out of nowhere. And then yet Steve Vai shreds over it in Halo 3. Elder Scrolls is pretty good. They don't really have any memorable soundtracks.
That one's more whimsical, right? Because it's more of a...
It's more fantasy.
Yeah, fantasy game.
But the one that was really good that I actually forgot about until recently was the kind of late... I don't know if it's the latest Doom game, but that's just full on jugga, 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 jugga.
Mick
Gordon. And it's just
Mick Gordon.
literally just Yeah, it's just full on just metal from like start to finish.
Well, I mean, he plays a freaking chainsaw. Like, it sounds like a guitar, but it's a chainsaw, or the other way around. It's
he samples a chainsaw.
Hard. When you blast that in your car, it like blows your windows out. It's amazing.
Mm.
Yeah, he sampled a chainsaw. That's crazy.
I got a PS4 Pro, and that was one of the games that it came with. And I didn't play it very much because I found it. I don't know. I find modern games really stressful because they're really hard, and they're just really hard, and you have to practice to get good at them. And I haven't got time, so I just find them really stressful. And the last one I played that I really enjoyed was Alien Isolation, but it was so scary. It was so terrifying.
It's hard.
So you got to play those games on like stupid mode. So put it on super easy. That's how I do it.
Well, I'd never play it on hard, but what I do is I go out. This is when I lived alone, and was before I had children and stuff. So when I lived in London, so we'd go out, we'd have a few beers in the pub, and I'd come back and I'd be like, right, I'm gonna play Alien Isolation, have like Dutch courage, and I'd just be like running through, going, come on, and doing all the like being really correct, like brave because I'd had a few beers. But then I would always forget to do the save my progress, so I'd get really far, like an idiot, just running around blind luck, just getting through bits, and then I'd be like, oh, I can't believe I've got this far, and then the alien would just pop out and kill me, terrify me, and then
you didn't save.
No, because you had to save. It was all manual saving, so it was a really it was a really cool feature, but it was so frustrating if you were playing it when you were drunk because you always forget to save. It's the last thing on your mind.
That's such a hard game. That had a really cool soundtrack too, because it was mostly ambient, and that was something that I was going to bring up too, is the use of silence sometimes is even better than a really good soundtrack. And the way that Alien Isolation did that, it would be completely silent sometimes, and then the alien would just come out of nowhere and get you.
Yeah, but they use that in films as well to a really good effect. Alien, the original films, quite a lot of bits where it's just literally just like hissing, and there's no real music.
The sound of the ship.
Yeah, and then it all kind of comes together. But I remember I played that game in VR as well because my old housemate had a lot of computer gear, and I used to play it in VR too. And the VR experience, oh god, it's really impressive. It's the only VR game I actually played because I was when he showed it to me, I was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm literally never going to do that. I'm going to sit in a room with a thing on my head with control sticks, like plugged into the Matrix. But he persuaded me to have a go, and it was really cool. It was really good because you're literally there, and the soundtrack, like you're saying, the bits where it just goes really quiet, and you can hear I think there's one bit where it kind of snuck up behind me, and it's always drooling. That alien, it's always got that slobber. You can hear
you can hear that.
You can hear it splatter on the floor, and then I turned around, and then there he was, and stuck his thing in my face and killed me.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Really, really scary though. But then all the old school games, like the original Mario Brothers and stuff, like the kind of 8-bit ones, they're like iconic. Even now, they sound so like the guy that wrote them, Koji Kondo, because he had the Legends of Zelda, and they're just so impressive. Given the kind of he was like, well, we've got this game and we need to do this, but you got to work in 8-bit, and you can't really use anything else other than. I mean, what did they even use? How would they even done that? I don't really know.
It's all MIDI.
It was all MIDI, yeah. So 1985. So I mean, even then, MIDI would have been pretty basic, right?
Incredibly.
It's crazy what they did with what little they had, and those soundtracks are iconic, or the themes really. I mean, think about Tetris. That's my alarm ringtone in the morning.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, even Mario is, just programming that, programming that one little part took forever. And then you got to do the little MIDI drums with it. And computers were so basic back then. Think about, Mega Man, how they did those soundtracks. It sounds like heavy metal music when you look at it on like sheet note music. If you just look at it, you would swear it was like heavy metal or something, but it's not. It's these little 8-bit clicks and sounds, and it's so cool.
It is. I always forget about computer game soundtracks, so I'm glad you brought it up, because there is like a lot of them that are really stand out going all the way back. Like I remember my brother had a Nintendo Wii. I think it was Mario Universe. But the music for that again was absolutely amazing. It was so perfect. It was a perfect game. It was brilliant. But the music was so well done, so well thought out, and how it all fit each level you're in and the aesthetic of the world. And the kind of, when it got a bit dangerous, it changed, and then it was all the whimsical bit too. It was just, I really like Nintendo. I mean, not a big computer game, but I grew up with Nintendo when I was a little kid. And I always liked that kind of, like, the way they approach games, making it doesn't have to be, super impressive or looking or super violent, or it can be entertaining and be nice. Right.
Well, I mean, and the secret to Nintendo back then, especially, was the gameplay loop. Like, how far can you get in Mario before you die?
Yeah, I literally never completed the original ever, because you just couldn't. That was it. I remember, I think I got to the 8th level once, and it was a big achievement. And then
and then it gets so hard,
Yeah,
but the way that those games worked was it was level scaling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, it starts you off really easy. The next level is a little bit harder. The next one's a little bit harder than that, and then by the time you get to 6 or 8, it's like there's so much stuff on the screen trying to kill you that it's almost impossible to navigate. When I watch people speed run that, I don't even understand how they do it.
Man,
like
that gives me anxiety.
How do you complete Tetris? Do you know?
No one's ever completed it, but someone just got the highest score ever. Fran and I saw it on Reddit, I want to say.
Yeah, I think so. Or Instagram, one of those two. Yeah, it was like a kid, too. Like a 17-year-old or something.
Yeah, and he got the highest score ever. So you can't beat Tetris because it just continues to speed up.
It beats you. Yep.
Getting faster and faster and faster.
Yeah, so no one's ever beaten it, but I think he has the highest score. And before that, it was somebody from the 90s.
All right.
Yeah, that's a really cool soundtrack, too.
It is. They're making a film, aren't they, about Tetris? I think. Is it Tetris? I'm sure I heard they're making a film about it.
I don't know how they would make a film out of Tetris.
Well, I imagine I don't think it'd be about the game. I don't think it'd be like someone stuck in a, having to arrange bricks, because that'd be really boring. But I think it's about the development of the game, maybe.
Oh, that would be cool. Like a documentary?
No, like an actual film. I think it is. It's either that or Monopoly. I can't remember which one it is. I know they're very different. My memories are
a little bit
terrible.
Equally frustrating, though.
When was Monopoly released for the first time?
Monopoly's been around forever.
Yeah, had to be like the turn of 20th century, probably.
1745.
Here's a question for you. Does the Monopoly man have a monocle?
You're about to get into MEs, aren't you?
Well, I always remember him having it, but apparently he doesn't. And I always used to think he did. So, I don't know. I'm sure he did. I used to play Monopoly a lot when I was a kid, and I'm sure he had a monocle. Because in the UK, posh men always used to wear monocles.
Yeah. No, I was sure he had one too.
It wasn't a stretch. It's not like, was he smoking a massive cigar? It's something that would be very fitting to his aesthetic and attire. But he never did, apparently. So,
that would be a really good special episode. Mandela Effects in music.
Is there any?
I think there's a lot.
Well,
I would have to look at the Reddit,
wouldn't it? I mean, if you're going to change something in music, but then it's so easy to get the words wrong. Because, and I'll tell you why. Because my partner's Finnish, so English is technically her third language because she's actually Kurdish. Moved to Finland, then moved here. So we have the subtitles on when we watch stuff because if it's American or accents, it's easier for her to understand. And I've kind of got used to it now, to the point where if I'm watching something and the subtitles aren't on, I'm kind of like, someone put the subtitles on. because you missed so much stuff that you just don't notice or you might not hear properly. And one of the big things is song lyrics. So they always put the song lyrics on. So if you watch a film or a TV show, and it's a song you might know, you think you know really well, and then you actually read the lyrics and you're like, oh, I've been singing that completely wrong my entire life. And not even close. It's like not even, it's completely different to what you think it is.
And it's always something that like you've sang in the car for years.
And it's always stupid as well. Like it's always like it's like way less meaningful than your version. You're like, what? Well, that doesn't make any sense. It's really weird. So maybe
I did that a lot, like in the 90s, because I grew up speaking German, so I didn't know English when I was like 6 or 7. So I sang like Ace of Base songs wrong all the time, and I thought I was mimicking the sounds properly until I actually read the lyrics later on. I was like, oh, okay, never mind. That's definitely not a word.
Yeah, it's weird. It's strange how it happens, but there must be Mandela stuff with music because there is with everything else. And music's very
absolutely.
I think there's more room for error with music in terms of like.
Yeah, we'll look into that.
You might have heard something or got the lyrics wrong because that happens all the time. Like my mum, every time she sings a song, she always gets the lyrics wrong. Like always, and she's never sung them right. Even with songs she really knows, it's always like she'll just make it up, and I'm like, that's not even close. Come on.
Well, yeah, maybe that could be our next episode for our special episode. But we're gonna wrap it up for today. In the comment section, put your favorite soundtrack because we would love to find new ones. Fran and I definitely. Richard is already way behind, especially on video game soundtracks. So video game soundtracks and movie soundtracks, put them in the comments. Tell us your favorites, and we will check them out.
Yes, new driving music.
Yes, exactly. You got anything to say, Richard, before we go?
No, I think you covered everything. I think we talked about all the people I wanted to make. There was one thing I wanted to talk about with people trying to get rights to certain music for films, and how certain pieces of music inspired films, like Godspeed's album. The song, particularly East Hastings, was the inspiration behind 28 Days Later.
Really?
I think, yeah. The guy that wrote it, I can't remember his name. I should do because he's just done a really massive new film, Civil War. But he wrote 28 Days Later based on listening to that.
Alex Garland.
Alex Garland, yeah, he wrote it after listening to that album, and he kind of because it's about I think it's like a 15-minute song, and it's East Hastings, so it's it's quite a good track, and yeah, he based kind of that film on that music. That music was kind of the inspiration for the film.
No kidding.
Yeah,
I had no idea.
But yeah, and the other thing with Godspeed is that they had the producers of Any Given Sunday. I think it's Any Given Sunday wanted to use their music for like the scene when the quarterback catches like the winning pass and scores a goal or whatever you call it. They offered them like an obscene amount of money, and because they're like complete anarchists, they were just like, no, you're not using our music, and we don't care about your money. But that was it. There was the only two little interesting. Well, I say interesting. I found them interesting, but yeah, they're the only two things. Because it's like when music, because that always happens. I mean, I'm pretty sure if you asked any novelist or any screenwriter, what music has inspired the films that you write, they could probably take every single thing they've done and be like, well, it was this album, this album, this album, and on this film I was listening to this, 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 and this. Because it helps you kind of get into the zone a little bit.
Yeah, I kind of do the same thing with photography. When I was in college during photo shoots, I would put on, whatever music and just sit there with my little notebook and just brainstorm ideas. And there's a lot of good stuff that came out of music that I came up with, like visually. That's pretty cool. Yeah,
it does. It helps. I listen to music all the time. I always listen to music when I'm working. Kind of instrumental stuff because I get sometimes distracted.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's too much singing. And that's why I did the same when you were saying about the computer game soundtracks. I did used to listen to a lot of those playlists on Spotify because they're very minimal but kind of nice and relaxing, but allow you to sort of keep focused on kind of what you're doing.
Yeah, helps you concentrate.
Yeah. No, they're really good. But no, there's some suggestions there, and if anyone has any more, stick them in the comments below in YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel as well, because I think something like 90% of the people that listen on YouTube don't subscribe. So it really helps us out if you do. And also you can kind of just comment in the comment section and we can, answer your questions or argue with you or whatever you want to do.
I don't know if we'll do the arguing part, but yeah, drop your favorite movie soundtracks or your favorite game soundtracks. We'll check them out. And otherwise, we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
See you later.